How much income will your pension actually give you if you decide to retire at 60? It's one of the most common questions that I'm asked, and it's actually one of the hardest for people to answer on their own, because it's not about the size of your pot, it's about how long your pot will last in retirement. In this video, we will walk you through 3 examples: a €250,000 pot, a €500,000 pot, and a €1 million pension pot. We'll see exactly how much income each of these can sustain if you retire at 60. We'll factor in the state pension, which kicks in at 66, inflation, fees, and safe withdrawal strategies. By the end, you'll know not just the numbers, but we'll also give you 5 levers that you can pull to improve your outcome, whatever pension pot size you're starting from. Before we dive into the numbers, let's set some ground rules. We're modeling a couple who both retire age 60, and we're planning for income right through to age 95. That is a 35-year retirement. Now, that is longer than average, but the real risk here isn't dying too soon, it's about living too long and running out of money. Their pensions remain invested in a balanced portfolio, 60% global equities, 40% bonds. That balance aims to provide growth with some stability. So historically, this type of mix has returned about 7 to 8% per year. But here we're going to be more conservative and assume 5.5% net of fees. We'll also assume 2% inflation each year, 1% annual fees for investment management. All figures here are showing before tax and are showing in future euros, meaning they already account for inflation. Now, here's something important. We're assuming the tax-free lump sum isn't spent immediately. Instead, it's set aside in a deposit account earning 1.5% net. This provides a buffer for flexibility or emergencies without overstating the long-term investment growth. And finally, the state pension. This begins at 66, paying just over €15,000 per person, so €30,000 combined for a couple that is inflation-linked. If you're single, the same principles will apply, just half the state pension, so think of this as our framework, not a prediction, but as a baseline to see what each pension pot can actually sustain in early retirement. Let's begin with a pension pot of €250,000 at age 60. If we apply the conventional 4% rule, this couple could draw down €10,000 per year. To be blunt, a €10,000 a year for a couple isn't retirement, it's simply survival. So let's stress test it against a more realistic benchmark. So suppose the couple try to live on the median disposable income for a retired couple in Ireland, and that is about €42,800 per year. Now, that is not extravagant, it's a more reasonable standard of living once the mortgage is cleared and children are independent. But here's the issue. At that spending level, the €250,000 pot is exhausted by age 67. Now, if you picture the model, you'll see why. The orange bar, that is the ARF, gets eaten away almost completely between age 60 and 66. By the time the state pension arrives at 66, there's hardly anything left. And by 67, the pot is entirely gone. So the takeaway is pretty clear. On its own, a €250,000 pension pot cannot sustain even a modest lifestyle for a couple retiring at 60. The money simply doesn't last long enough. This isn't the whole story though, because now we need to factor in the state pension and the outcome changes dramatically. Now let's bring in Irish state pension. So again, it currently pays around €30,000 combined for a couple. It begins at age 66 and it is fully linked to inflation. This is where the picture begins to shift. From age 60 to 65, the couple will rely heavily on their €250,000 pot. Yes, puts real pressure in those early years, but from 66 onwards, the state pension becomes the anchor. It covers most of the couple's essential needs. Now, the ARF doesn't have to carry the whole load, it only needs to act as a top-up, and that change transforms the sustainability of the plan significantly. When we model this scenario, the couple can sustain about $37,250 per year in income all the way through 95. Here's how this works in practice. In the early years, the couple draw down more from their ARF and their tax-free lump sum, which is set aside in cash. From 66 onwards, the state pension kicks in, giving them a foundation of around €30,000. And the ARF stretches out much further because it's only bridging the gap between the state pension and what their funding needs are. So what's the lesson? On its own, a €250,000 pot simply isn't enough. But combined with the state pension and drawn down carefully, it can support a reasonable lifestyle right through retirement. So far we've seen that with the state pension included, even a modest €250,000 pot could support $37,000 per year right through the age of 95. On paper that looks pretty solid, but the question is, how safe is it? This is where many people start to worry. You've often heard comments like the state pension won't exist when I retire, or the government simply cannot afford it anymore. But here's the truth. The Irish state pension is one of the cornerstones of the social system. Yes, the age may rise, that's already been discussed and put in place. But the pension itself is extremely unlikely to disappear. It's politically and socially too important. So the real uncertainty isn't around the state pension, it's around your private pension pot. And this is where something called sequence risk comes into play. Sequence risk is the danger of a bad run of investment returns early in retirement. If markets fall in the first 5 years while you're drawing down your income, your pot takes a double hit. Withdrawals plus market losses, and it makes it much harder to recover from a downturn later on. That's why financial planners don't just model average returns. A good financial planner will use stress testing, looking at thousands of different market scenarios, good and bad, to see how often the plan holds up. So what you get is a probability of success, not a guarantee, but a way of testing resilience against real-world uncertainty. For our €250,000 example, the sustainability of the €37,250 income is based on a kind of stress testing. It's not about guessing. It's designed to survive bad markets as well as good ones. That's why we be conservative with growth rates. So the lesson here is you don't just need a number, you need to know how robust that number is when life and markets throw challenges your way. So what does a safe withdrawal strategy actually look like? For our €250,000 example, we modeled sustainable income of $37,250 per year. That's the level which gives the couple a very high chance, close to 9 in 10 scenarios, of making it all the way to age 95 without running out of money. Safe withdrawal doesn't mean locking into one rigid number for life. It means being flexible and adaptable. Here's how the strategy should work in practice. In the early years before the state pension begins, the IRF and the tax-free lump sum do the heavy lifting. At age 66, the pension becomes the foundation, taking the strain off the IRF. Withdrawals are then adjusted with inflation so the couple's spending power is preserved, but flexibility is built in. So if the markets perform well, there's a little bit room to take more. But if markets underperform, withdrawals can be trimmed temporarily to protect the pot. I want you to think of it this way. Safe withdrawals is not about being overly cautious. It's about having a structure that allows you to spend confidently, enjoy retirement, and sleep at night knowing you're not on the track to run out of money. Now let's move up to a pension pot of €500,000 at the age of 60. You might assume that if the pot doubles, the income would double too. That's not how retirement math works. When we run the model, the maximum sustainable income rises to about €53,250 per year. That is a good step up from $37,250 with a €250,000 pot. But it's nowhere near double. And the reason comes down to timing. Between age 60 and 66, before the state pension kicks in, the couple are really relying heavily on their IRF. That's when the withdrawals are their highest and when sequence risk is greatest. If you look at the model, the orange bar shows the IRF being drawing down hard in those early years. Alongside that, the blue bar, the tax-free lump sum, plays its role, smoothing out some of the need. But the strain on the IRF is still significant. Once the state pension begins at 66, the pressure eases. But by then, some of the early damage is already done. That's why a €500,000 pot doesn't produce twice the income of a €250,000 pot. It produces about €53,250 sustainably. And again, the focus here isn't on tax optimization or leaving money for inheritance. It's simply answering the critical question. If you're retired 60 with €500,000, what income you actually be able to sustain right through to age 95? Now, let's push it even further. What if you retire at 60 with a pension pot of €1 million? If the couple stick with the same sustainable income as they did at 500,000, the 53,250, the pot obviously lasts. In fact, it does more than last. It overshoots massively. By age 95, they'd still have about €1.7 million in today's money left in their IRF. Why does this happen? Two reasons stand out. First, the tax-free lump sum is much larger. The blue bar absorbs a big share of the early spending, so the IRF isn't hit as hard. Second, because the IRF is protected in those early years, it is time to compound and outpace inflation over the long term. So under a cautious drawdown pot, doesn't just last, it grows. But here's the thing, not everyone wants to preserve wealth. Some people want to maximize their drawdown, enjoy their money, enjoy their retirement, and when they pass away, they don't care if they leave nothing or a little behind them. When we model that approach, the maximum sustainable income comes out about $78,750 per year. So compared to $53,250 with a 500,000 pot, a €1 million pot supports nearly 79,000 right through to age 95. And once again, the goal here isn't tax efficiency or estate planning. It's about answering the one question that matters here. What lifestyle can a €1 million pot actually buy if you retire at 60? We've looked at €250,000, €500,000 and €1 million separately. Now let's put them side by side. €250,000 pot supports $37,250 per year. €500,000 pot supports $53,250 per year, and a €1 million pot supports $78,750. Do you notice the pattern? When the pot doubled from $250 to $500, income didn't double. It only rose by $16,000. But when the pot doubles again from $500,000 to $1 million, income rose by about €25,000. Why doesn't it scale evenly? It's those first 6 years, from age 60 to 66, before the state pension begins. That's when the IRF is under the most pressure. The orange bar shows the withdrawals clearly, and no matter how big the pot is, those years cap how much income you can take sustainably. The other big factor here is the tax-free lump sum. A bigger pot will give a bigger lump sum. The blue bar covers more of the early years, giving the IRF room to grow instead of shrink. That's why with the €1 million pot, you can still have €1.7 million left under a conservative drawdown unless you choose to increase the withdrawals. So, pot size absolutely matters, but it doesn't map one for one into income. What matters just as much is timing, the drawdown strategy, and the role of the state pension. Now the numbers are clear, but your outcome isn't fixed. There are 5 levers that you can control that make a bigger difference than potentially even the pension pot size alone. The first is retirement age. Retiring later just doesn't mean more years of contributions, it also means fewer years that you have to fund before the state pension kicks in. Even delaying from 60 to 62 or 65 can transform your results. The second is contributions. Small increases add up quickly. Topping up in your 40s or 50s gives compounding more time to work. And with Irish tax relief, every €100 you contribute could cost you as little as €60 net. The third is withdrawal strategies. Flexibility is everything. Don't lock yourself into one fixed income for 35 years. Take more in the stronger years, scale back in the weaker years. That flexibility can help protect your pot. Fourth is investment approach. If you go too conservative, your money won't grow enough to keep up with inflation. But if you go too aggressive, you'll risk big losses at the wrong time. The right balance matters, especially in those early years. Fifth, regular reviews. A plan won't last untouched for 3 decades. Check it every year. Update assumptions, review performance, and adjust it as life changes. These are the levers that you can control, and together, they often make a bigger difference than the pension pot size alone. If you're not sure where you stand, whether you're ahead, behind, or just completely unclear, that's exactly the kind of modeling that I can help people with. We'll review your pension, investments, taxes, cash flow, and map out a strategy so that you know exactly where you stand. The link is in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, you'll definitely want to watch the next one, because in that one, we'll take the exact same size pots, 250, 500, and a million, but instead of retiring at 60, we'll show you what income they can provide if you retire at age 65. The difference is dramatic, and it could completely change the way that you begin thinking about retirement. So click that video now, and we'll show you what a 5-year delay could mean for your pension.